Hi everyone, Anne Bounty from Said With Love. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome back to another month of a Year of Hearts. This is this month's block. It's called Heart of Glass and it's a celebration glass, be it a martini glass, a champagne glass, or a mocktail if you like me. But we have the cutest little glass with a lovely little heart swizzle stick. And then if you want some extra little bubbles of love coming out of the glass. So that's what we're doing this month. And I've made a couple of different versions for you. I made one version with a bit more of a scrappy background. That one is just, I'm just loving the low volume background. So that one was fun. And I did a needle turn applique heart on the swizzle stick for that one. It's a little, I'm not a big fan of needle turn applique hand stitching. It just takes a bit of time, but it does look good when it's done. The other way, so in this block, I actually just did raw edge applique and actually, no, that's not the one I did raw edge applique on. This is the one I used the invisible thread on to just sort of do needle turn applique, but on a machine. So that's what I did with that one. And yes, there is a third one. I did one with the darker backgrounds, the pinky backgrounds, and the white champagne flute or the white martini glass. And there are cute little hearts on that fabric. I couldn't resist. And this is the one that I did just raw edge applique, zigzagging around the edge. So lots of different options. We've done now lots of different types of applique, so you get to choose from now on which one you want to do on each of the month's projects. Now the stem, the stick, the swizzle stick. There are a multitude of different ways you can do that as well. I tried them all. Not sure which one I'm particularly most fond of. You can do raw edge applique, obviously. Just literally cut out the size that you want it to be. I've got instructions in the pattern of how to actually do a folded version, sort of a bit like binding, bias binding, where you fold it in half and then fold it in on itself. I'll try and show you in here. So, got my piece of fabric. I've folded in half to get a crease and then folded in one end and then folded in the two long sides to have the raw seams behind, so that you get then a fairly nice thin swizzle stick. And I actually found this one was probably the easiest, and it meant then you could do any kind of applique on it. In fact, I think on this one, I just literally got a coordinating thread and I stitched right around the edge on the top. Wasn't even an eighth of an inch. It was literally right on the fold, and that looked fine. It's going to be nice and stable. It's not going to go anywhere. So again, you've got a few different options, I suppose, for how you want your swizzle stick to be. You may find some really cool fabric that you perhaps want to use that's got stripe or something, some big creative. Now, for this one on the darker background, I didn't put the little love hearts of bubbles coming out of my drink, because I had this cool fabric which sort of looked like it was having little fireworks coming out of the drink anyway. So I didn't bother on that one. And so I'm just about to, and I'm probably going to use, that free motion applique that we did, where you really see the thread and you go round and round a few times. I'm probably going to do that on these little hearts, just to give them a bit of a sort of more casual kind of look and a movement to it. So I'll see what that looks like when I get a chance to do that. But now the block is pieced normally, except this very bottom of the glass, this sort of base, which we've got these awesome diagonals. I've given you the instructions to do foundation paper piecing for that. Now, as we haven't done any of that up until now, I've got a little bit of a description of how to do it. So I'll pop that in here. I just wanted to show you how we're going to do the foundation paper piecing for the base of our glass. So in your pattern, you've got this cute little foundation paper piecing. It's a nice, simple one. It's a great place to start with some foundation paper piecing. And the first thing we need to do is actually cut out the template. First of all, make sure when you print it, that you print it at 100% actual size, no fit to size or anything like that, because it will change the size of the template. So we've cut out our template, not on the solid line, but on the dotted line, which is our seam allowance, so that when we have finished making this, we can sew it into our block, and we've actually got a seam allowance to do that with. So the difficult thing I think most people find with foundation paper piecing is that you're not putting your fabrics on this side. We're actually putting our fabrics on the other side, which makes it hard, because then we go, well, hang on, how do I know where the pieces go? You've got to put it up to the light a little bit, have a light source underneath. So I actually, when I'm sitting at my sewing machine, I've got the lights of my sewing machine just here, and I just sort of put it up like that so that I can see the lines and where my fabric is. So the very first piece of fabric we are going to put down is going to be the A1, and it's going to be right sides up. So we're going to put it on the back side of the paper, but the fabric is right side up. And what we've told you to cut the size of this piece to is larger than your piece of paper, just to make life really easy and simple for you. Okay, so we've got that, and you go, what do I do next? So I like to pin my piece of fabric at that point. Now, I know my seams are going to be over here, so I'm going to pin sort of down the bottom in the middle so that the pin's out of the way. So then I can be looking at it much easier. So we've told you to cut two squares, and again, that makes it easier for if you're a beginner. If you're used to using foundation paper piecing, you can cut your fabric at a smaller size. Angles are always a little bit difficult when you first start, so I always suggest doing a square or a big rectangle. You will have some leftover cuttings, but better to get it right than have to cut 5 times. Okay, so we're going to turn it over. So the next piece we're going to do, we're going to do A1, we've already put down. A2 is our next one. Now, because here I haven't really got light to be able to look at things, I'm actually going to just do a little bit of a cheat. And I'm just going to fold my piece of fabric back at that line. So I've got a little fold line here, because then I know where the seam is going to be. And we need to make sure that we've got seam allowance over here. Now, with an angle like this, obviously, if we're trying to, try and fold it that way, you may not get enough. This one has. You may not have the right angles to cover everything. So I suggest for this one that you sort of do it more in the center of the square or across the diagonal of the square. So if we're going to just put the little fold there so I know where to flip it over, we're going to have ample coverage of that piece. Now, as I said, if you've got a little light box or stand up against a window or use your sewing machine light, you'll be able to see that you've got enough coverage for that. So that position is really quite good. So I'm just going to scooch my pin over there, and I'm then going to flip it over, take it to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew that seam between the A1 and A2. The other thing with paper piecing, you want to make your stitch length really quite short, because we're going to be ripping this paper off afterwards. And obviously when you've sewn a seam and you're ripping paper off, you don't want that seam to fall apart. So a smaller stitch length, I use 1.5 on my sewing machine. And what we're going to do is actually start out here so that we come for a seam right across the seam allowance, all the way down that seam. Just take it nice and slow, and then all the way out to the other end of that seam allowance. So here I've sewn that seam. Might be a bit hard to see in the light, but I've sewn that seam. I've just come straight back from the sewing machine. I'm actually going to take out my pin and I'm going to fold back that seam on the paper. So I've got paper face up and I'm folding the line that we've just sewn, because the next thing we need to do is trim off that seam allowance. So I'm just using my little ruler, and that's a little 1/4 inch. So I'm lining that 1/4 inch line up with the fold on my paper. I'm going to come in that scrap. I can fold my paper back, and then I can turn it over and go to my ironing station, which I might just finger press, and press that back. And so now we have one side of our martini glass base. Okay, so now we need to do the second side. Same thing. So I need to come, because I can't really see in this light, I'm going to just do a quick fold there. Right sides together. Always remember, right sides together. I'm kind of just going to do that little angle. I'm just going to fold that there so I can do a little test fold and press. So that's what it's going to look like. And have I covered all of that? I've got a little bit extra for seam allowances. The whole works. Fantastic. So I'm going to put my pin in. Then I can turn it over and I could go back to my sewing machine and I can sew all the way on that seam, all the way through the seam allowances. Now, for quite a few pieces of foundation paper piecing, not this particular pattern, you'll have little seams that are inside the block, not out into that don't have a line going out into the seam allowance. So sometimes you just need to do really short little seams and do a stop start or a locking stitch or something like that on the seams. But luckily, this one's nice and easy. So I'm just going to go and do that last seam and I'll come back. So that final seam is done. I can remove my pin, and it was the A1 to A3 seam that I did. So I'm going to fold that back. Come and grab my little 1/4 inch ruler, take that off. And I will go to the iron this time and give that a good press. So there we have, good press, and we're done, almost. So then we're going to turn it back over and we're going to use this paper template as where we cut the seam allowance. So I'm going to come in and I am just putting my little 1/4 inch line on the two lines there. Do those two sides. There we go. And there is the little base of our martini glass. So then we can take it back to the rest of our blocks and look at adding that in there. Now you'll see that the stem of the glass comes into our base, and you should look very carefully at matching those points there with the base of your stem. This pattern is now available for my newsletter subscribers. For the first couple of days of the month, each month, they're getting this block for free. And then after that, it's a paid pattern, a paid PDF pattern that you can download from my shop. All the links are below, all the information's below. So if you want to come and join us in a Year of Hearts, sign up to my newsletter, and then each month you'll be able to do a fun, cool block themed around hearts, just like this Heart of Glass block.